the smell of jet fuel and anxiety. That's what Heathrow Airport smelled like in 1970. Farrokh Bulsara knew that smell intimately. Every day he arrived at Terminal 3 before sunrise, pulling on his baggage handler uniform, a shapeless blue jacket that hid the flamboyant soul underneath. Around him, passengers rushed toward departures, boarding passes clutched in sweaty hands, chasing vacations and business deals and new lives. Farrokh watched them all. He carried their Samsonite cases and leather trunks, their golf clubs and hat boxes, their entire worlds compressed into luggage, and with every suitcase he lifted, he wondered when would it be his turn. His family had fled Zanzibar's revolution in 1964. His childhood had been erased by violence. His identity had been packed into a single bag when they escaped to London. Now, 6 years later, he was still carrying bags, but at night, in the mirror of his cramped bedsit in Feltham, he was something else. He was Freddie, and Freddie didn't carry luggage. Freddie owned the stage. Before we dive deeper into this extraordinary journey, if you love untold stories of music legends, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. September 5, 1946. The island of Zanzibar, off the coast of East Africa. A boy was born into a Parsi family, followers of Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest religions. His parents named him Farrokh, which means fortunate in Persian. His father, Bohemian Bulsara, worked as a cashier for the British Colonial Office. They lived in Stone Town, Zanzibar's historic quarter, where narrow alleyways wound between ancient buildings and the air smelled of cloves and sea salt. Farrokh's childhood was split between two worlds. At home, his family maintained strict Parsi traditions. They worshipped at the Zoroastrian fire temple. But outside, Zanzibar was a melting pot of African, Arab, Indian, and European cultures. The boy absorbed everything. When Farrokh was 8 years old, his parents sent him to boarding school in India, St. Peter's School in Panchgani. It was there, far from his island home, that something remarkable happened. The boy who had always been shy discovered music. He joined the school choir. He started piano lessons, and at the age of 12 he formed his first band, the Hectics. They played rock and roll covers at school functions. The other boys called him Freddie because they couldn't pronounce Farrokh properly. He didn't mind. Freddie felt lighter than Farrokh. Freddie felt like possibility. But while Freddie was discovering himself in India, Zanzibar was collapsing. In 1964, when Farrokh was 17, revolution tore through the island. The Zanzibar revolution was brutal and swift. The Arab ruling class was overthrown. Thousands were killed. The violence targeted anyone perceived as foreign. The Bulsara family's comfortable life shattered overnight. Bohemian Bulsara made a desperate decision. They would flee to England. They packed whatever they could carry into a few suitcases. Family photographs, Farrokh's piano sheet music. Everything else was left behind. They arrived in London in early 1964. Farrokh was 17 years old. He had lost his homeland, his childhood home, his sense of belonging. England was cold, grey, and unwelcoming. The Bulsara family moved into a small flat in Feltham, a working-class suburb near Heathrow Airport. Farrokh enrolled at Isleworth Polytechnic, then later at Ealing Art College to study graphic design. But everything felt like survival. 1969. Farrokh Bulsara needed money. His art college stipend barely covered supplies, let alone rent or food. His father pressured him constantly. Get a proper job. Stop wasting time with music. But Farrokh couldn't let go of music. He played in small bands, Ibex, Sour Milk Sea, that performed in dingy pubs to crowds of 15 people. None of them went anywhere. His father's disappointment grew heavier. So Farrokh took a job at Heathrow Airport. Baggage handler. Terminal 3, 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. The work was physically exhausting. Lifting suitcases off conveyor belts, loading them onto trolleys, hauling them to the correct carousels. His back ached, his hands blistered. Passengers treated him like furniture. Invisible, disposable, just another brown-skinned immigrant doing manual labor. But the job gave him something crucial: freedom. His father couldn't complain about a steady paycheck, and the afternoon shifts meant his evenings were free. Free to attend gigs, free to rehearse, free to become someone else. Every night, Farrokh would return to his small rented room in Feltham. It was barely 10 feet by 10 feet. A single bed, a wardrobe, a cracked mirror mounted on the wall, and it was in front of that mirror that Farrokh Bulsara began to die, and Freddie Mercury began to be born. He would stand there for hours after his airport shift, still smelling of jet fuel and sweat. He would drape bedsheets around his shoulders like royal capes. He would hold a broomstick like a microphone stand. He would sing, not the rock and roll covers he performed with his struggling bands, but something bigger, operatic, theatrical. He would move his body in ways that felt forbidden, hips swaying, arms outstretched, head thrown back. In that tiny room, in front of that cracked mirror, he was not Farrokh the baggage handler. He was Freddie the performer, and Freddie was magnificent. His flatmate at the time later recalled, "I'd come home at night and hear him through the door, singing in this incredible voice, talking to himself like he was addressing an audience of thousands. At first I thought he was mad. Then I realized he was rehearsing for something that didn't exist yet. But what was Freddie rehearsing for? And how would a baggage handler at Heathrow ever get the chance to step onto a real stage?" While Farrokh worked at Heathrow by day, by night he descended into the bohemian underground of Kensington Market. If you lived through the late 1960s and early 1970s in London, you remember Kensington Market. It was a labyrinth of stalls selling second-hand clothing, vintage records, incense and rebellion. It was London's creative heart, and Farrokh Bulsara was obsessed with it. He started spending his Heathrow wages on clothes from the market: velvet jackets, silk scarves, platform boots, feather boas, items that made Farrokh feel alive. But more than shopping, Farrokh started selling. He and his friend Roger Taylor opened a stall together. They sold vintage clothes and accessories. Farrokh had an eye for the theatrical. He would curate pieces that were flamboyant, glittering, strange. Sequined tops, leather trousers, anything that caught the light. But he wasn't just selling clothes, he was studying them. Every piece of fabric, every sequin, every feather boa was research. Research for the stage persona he was building in his mind. The costumes that would later define Queen's visual identity, the white leotards, the crown, the military jackets dripping with medals, all had their origins in those Kensington Market stalls. Freddie was designing his future, one glittering piece at a time. During this period, Farrokh was also completing his degree at Ealing Art College. He studied graphic design and illustration, and it was there that he created something that would become one of rock music's most iconic symbols, the Queen crest. The logo featured a phoenix rising above a stylized letter Q, flanked by two lions and a crab, with a crown at the top. Each element represented the zodiac signs of the four band members. The design was intricate, regal, and theatrical. It looked like a coat of arms for rock royalty, which is exactly what Freddie intended. Farrokh Bulsara was still hauling luggage at Heathrow, still selling clothes at Kensington Market, still struggling with failing bands. But everything was about to change because of one man, Brian May. Brian May was a quietly brilliant guitarist and astrophysics student at Imperial College London. He played in a band called Smile with drummer Roger Taylor. Smile had a following in London's college circuit. They were good, technical, but they lacked something. They lacked fire. Farrokh had been following Smile for months. He would show up at their gigs, stand at the front, and study every detail. After one gig in 1970, Farrokh approached Brian backstage. "I think I should be your singer," he said. Brian looked at this small, intense young man with long black hair and penetrating eyes. "We already have a singer," Brian replied. "I know," Farrokh said, "but I'm better." It was audacious, it was arrogant, but it was also true. Within weeks, Smile's lead singer left the band. Brian called Farrokh. "All right," he said, "show us what you've got." Farrokh didn't just show them, he exploded. At the first rehearsal, he commanded the room. His voice was powerful, operatic, capable of hitting notes that seemed impossible. His stage presence, even in a cramped rehearsal space, was magnetic. Brian and Roger were stunned. This wasn't just a good singer. This was something else entirely. "We need a new name," Farrokh announced. "Smile is too soft. We need something bold, something that demands attention." He paused for effect. "Queen." Brian frowned. "Queen, that's provocative." Farrokh smiled. "Exactly." The band was forming. Brian May on guitar, Roger Taylor on drums, John Deacon on bass, and Farrokh Bulsara on vocals. But Farrokh made a decision that would define everything that followed. He was going to kill Farrokh Bulsara. Not literally, but symbolically. He was going to erase the boy from Zanzibar, the immigrant baggage handler, the Parsi son, who could never quite fit in. He chose a new name, Freddie Mercury. Freddie, the nickname he'd carried since childhood in India. Mercury, the Roman messenger god. fleet-footed and unpredictable. Also, appropriately, Mercury was his rising sign in astrology. The name felt dangerous. It felt like transformation. It felt like freedom. His father was horrified. In Parsi culture, your name carries your family's lineage, your heritage, your identity. To change it was a betrayal. But Freddie didn't care. He had already lost Zanzibar. He had already lost his childhood. Now he was choosing who he would become. Years later, in a rare moment of vulnerability, Freddie would say, "I'm not going to be a star. I am a star." That wasn't arrogance, that was survival. For a boy who had lost everything, his homeland, his identity, his sense of safety, becoming Freddie Mercury wasn't just about fame, it was about existence. It was about taking up space in a world that had tried to erase him. But becoming Freddie Mercury required more than a name change. It required a complete transformation. And that transformation was about to begin in the most unlikely place imaginable. Queen had released 3 albums. They'd had moderate success, but they were also deeply in debt. The band was fracturing under the pressure, and Freddie was creating something that would either save them or destroy them completely. He called it Bohemian Rhapsody. It was 6 minutes long. It had no chorus. It combined opera, hard rock, and ballad into a structure that defied every rule of commercial radio. When Freddie brought the song to the band, their manager was horrified. "Radio stations won't play a 6-minute song with an opera section," he insisted. Freddie's response was simple: "They will play this one." Recording Bohemian Rhapsody nearly broke them. The operatic section alone required 180 separate vocal overdubs. This was before digital recording. Every harmony had to be recorded onto tape, then bounced onto another tape, layering voice upon voice until the studio equipment was literally at its technical limit. The tape became so worn from overuse that you could see through it when held up to the light. Freddie was relentless. The studio engineers thought he was insane. Brian May later admitted, "There were moments I thought we were making a terrible mistake, but when Bohemian Rhapsody was finally finished, something extraordinary happened. The band played it for a few friends. The room fell silent. Then someone started crying. Not from sadness, from awe. They had created something unprecedented, a rock opera compressed into 6 minutes. Radio DJs refused to play it. Too long, too weird. But then Kenny Everett, a maverick radio personality, got his hands on a copy. He played it 14 times in 2 days. His phones exploded. Listeners demanded more. Bohemian Rhapsody shot to #1 in the UK and stayed there for 9 weeks. It became the 3rd best-selling single of all time in Britain. The baggage handler from Heathrow had just created one of the most iconic songs in music history. But success brought new challenges, and the biggest challenge was one that Freddie had been hiding for years. Before Freddie Mercury became a global icon, there was Mary Austin. She was working at a London boutique when Freddie met her in 1969. He was still Farrokh then, still hauling luggage at Heathrow. They fell in love. Mary didn't judge him. She didn't demand that he be anything other than himself. She supported his music when no one else believed in it. When Queen finally achieved success, Freddie bought a house for Mary. "You are the love of my life," he told her. In 1973, he proposed. Mary said yes. But the engagement would never become a marriage, because Freddie was hiding something he could barely admit to himself. He was attracted to men. In the early 1970s, this was not something you could speak about openly. Homosexuality had only been partially decriminalized in Britain in 1967. The stigma was crushing. Rock stars were supposed to be heterosexual idols. For someone like Freddie, an immigrant, a Parsi, already on the margins, to be openly gay would be career suicide. So he buried it. But by 1976, Freddie couldn't hide anymore. Late one night, he sat Mary down. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. His voice was shaking. Mary already knew. "I think I'm bisexual," Freddie said. Then he corrected himself. "No, I think I'm gay." The words hung in the air between them. Everything they had built together shattered in that moment. Mary moved out. But here's what most people don't understand about Freddie and Mary. They never truly separated. Freddie bought her an apartment nearby. He called her every day. When he bought Garden Lodge, his grand Kensington mansion, he gave her a key. "You are my common-law wife," he told her. "You are my best friend. You are everything to me." When Freddie wrote "Love of My Life," it was about Mary. When he died, he left her the majority of his estate. Their relationship defied definition. It was love beyond sexuality. love beyond convention. After Freddie acknowledged his sexuality, his life split into two distinct realities. In public, he was Freddie Mercury, the flamboyant, untouchable rock god. On stage, he commanded audiences of tens of thousands with a presence that bordered on supernatural. In private, Freddie struggled. He frequented gay clubs in London and Munich. He had relationships that were passionate but often unstable. Freddie craved intimacy but found mostly exploitation. The pressure was immense. Queen was selling out stadiums worldwide. "We will rock you. We are the champions." Another one bites the dust. Every album had to be bigger. Every tour had to be more spectacular. And Freddie carried the weight of it all. He began drinking heavily. He threw lavish parties at Garden Lodge. But friends noticed that Freddie often seemed lonely in the middle of his own celebrations, watching the chaos with sad eyes. In 1985, something happened that would define the peak and the beginning of the end. Live Aid. July 13, 1985. Wembley Stadium, London. Live Aid was the most ambitious charity concert ever organized. A global event broadcast to 2 billion people across 150 countries. Every major rock act in the world was performing. U2, David Bowie, Elton John, Led Zeppelin reuniting, and Queen. Each band had 20 minutes. Backstage, Freddie was terrified. Not because of the crowd, but because of what was happening inside his body. He had been feeling sick for months. Unexplained exhaustion, night sweats, weight loss. He hadn't told anyone. But standing backstage at Wembley, feeling weak and shaky, Freddie knew something was seriously wrong. Brian May found him in the dressing room 30 minutes before showtime. Freddie was sitting with his head in his hands. "I don't know if I can do this," Freddie whispered. Brian had never heard him say anything like that before. Roger Taylor joined them. They tried to rally him. Freddie nodded slowly. Then he downed a shot of vodka, stood up and said, "Right then, let's go make history." Queen took the stage at 6:41 p.m. The moment Freddie walked out, something shifted. Whatever was happening inside his body, whatever fear or pain he was carrying, it vanished. He owned that stage. He didn't just perform, he conducted. He turned 72,000 people at Wembley and 2 billion watching worldwide into his instrument. "I-O," he sang, and the crowd sang it back. For 20 minutes, Freddie Mercury was transcendent. When Queen walked off stage, other performers watched in stunned silence. David Bowie reportedly said, "How the hell do we follow that?" Elton John later admitted, "Freddie stole the show." That 20-minute performance is still considered the greatest live rock performance of all time. But what the audience didn't know was that they had just witnessed Freddie Mercury at war with his own body, and the war was one he was losing. Freddie Mercury was diagnosed with AIDS. The doctor delivered the news in a sterile clinic in London. Freddie sat in silence. Then he asked one question: how long? With the medical knowledge of 1987, AIDS was a death sentence. The disease was devastating the gay community. Friends were dying. Hospitals refused to admit AIDS patients. The stigma was suffocating. Freddie made a decision. He would tell almost no one. Mary Austin knew. His partner Jim Hutton knew. But the band didn't know. The public didn't know. Freddie's reasoning was simple. If people knew he had AIDS, everything would become about the disease. The music would be overshadowed. He would become Freddie Mercury, the AIDS victim, instead of Freddie Mercury, the artist. So he worked, relentlessly. Queen released The Miracle in 1989 and Innuendo in 1991. Both albums are extraordinary, but Innuendo is haunting. You can hear Freddie fighting. His voice, once effortless, now required immense effort. There are moments in songs like The Show Must Go On where you can hear him pushing past pain. Brian May later revealed, "I didn't think Freddie could sing it. He was so weak. He looked at me and said, 'I'll do it, darling.' Then he downed a vodka and sang it in one take. I cried." By 1991, Freddie Mercury was dying. His body was skeletal. He had developed Kaposi's sarcoma, a cancer common in AIDS patients. He could barely walk, but he refused to stop recording. He spent his final days at Garden Lodge, surrounded by Mary Austin, Jim Hutton, and close friends. The outside world was starting to suspect. Photographers camped outside his house. Tabloids published speculation. On November 23, 1991, Freddie finally released a statement. "I wish to confirm that I have been tested HIV positive and have AIDS. I felt it correct to keep this information private to protect the privacy of those around me. However, the time has come now for my friends and fans around the world to know the truth. 24 hours later, on November 24, 1991, Freddie Mercury died. He was 45 years old. The world went into shock. Fans gathered outside Garden Lodge, leaving flowers and candles. Radio stations played Queen songs on repeat. Tributes poured in from every corner of the music industry. But perhaps the most powerful tribute came 5 months later. April 20th, 1992, Wembley Stadium. 72,000 people filled the stadium. Another 1 billion watched worldwide. The Freddie Mercury tribute concert for AIDS awareness. David Bowie, Elton John, George Michael, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, all performing Queen songs, all paying tribute to Freddie. The concert raised millions for AIDS research and awareness. But more than that, it shattered the silence around AIDS. For years, the disease had been whispered about, hidden, stigmatized. Freddie's death and the tribute concert brought it into the open. Suddenly, people were talking. Funding increased. Research accelerated. Freddie Mercury, even in death, was saving lives. But the legacy goes deeper. Freddie Mercury, the boy who fled a revolution, who carried luggage at Heathrow, who stood in front of a cracked mirror and dreamed of stages, fundamentally changed what it meant to be a performer. He proved that you could be flamboyant, theatrical, unabashedly yourself, and still command respect. He showed that rock music could incorporate opera, could break rules, could be both masculine and feminine. He created space for every artist who came after him to be more honest, more daring, more free. Today, Bohemian Rhapsody has been streamed over 2 billion times. Queen's music is everywhere. Films, commercials, sporting events. The 2018 biographical film Bohemian Rhapsody became the highest-grossing musical biopic of all time, introducing Freddie to a new generation. From Farrokh Bulsara, the baggage handler at Heathrow who carried other people's dreams, to Freddie Mercury, the frontman who made the world sing. The journey was built on loss and reinvention, on hiding and revelation, on survival and transcendence. Every suitcase Freddie carried at that airport was practice for carrying the weight of fame. Every night he stood in front of that cracked mirror was preparation for standing in front of billions. Every moment of feeling like an outsider fueled his determination to create a space where everyone could belong. Freddie Mercury died more than 30 years ago. But he is more alive now than ever. His voice still echoes through stadiums. His image still inspires artists. His courage still gives strength to anyone who has ever felt like they don't fit in. Because Freddie proved something essential. You don't have to fit in. You can create your own world. You can transform yourself. You can take the pain of being an outsider and turn it into power. The boy from Zanzibar who lost everything became the man who gave everything. And in doing so, Farrokh Bulsara didn't just become Freddie Mercury. He became immortal.